It is very sad to see a rich body of people suddenly finding that they can't. Well, actually, I was going to say it's a rich body of people over 50 who are finding that they can't connect to the world. But we're actually seeing through the likes of Facebook and a lot of youngsters that are finding themselves disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the way they feel, they don't have the motivation to push forward.
Yeah. I think that's a symptom that runs through the different generations. I don't think one single generation suffers from that. The younger generations, because of lots of things going on. I mean, partly Brexit, partly austerity, partly just global politics. That they can't make decisions. They don't know whether to go to university. It's going to cost too much, so they can't plan their future out like generations of the past have. So I mean, I do feel sorry for the younger generations.
Yeah. Oh, it's very hard to know how they're going. It's very hard to know how to advise young people nowadays either as well.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult for them to know how to plan. And now we can say that because what I was expecting to be doing soon, I'm not going to be doing.
But also, I mean, we're just about to go through one trauma as a nation. I mean, that's what I see it as leaving the European Union and how detrimental that's going to be. But in 10, 15 years' time, we'll have another revolution, the technology revolution, where a lot of jobs will disappear through automation. And yes, there'll be new jobs created through new technologies, but not enough to replace everything. So we're going to have to look at how people are funded, in terms of how they're going to pay for mortgage, clothes, and food, the basics. We're going to see more people having more leisure time and spending less time in the workforce.
But again, as you said the other day, you didn't mention that specific thing, but there were certain commonalities to what we were talking about with the 1980s. Yes. And those very words that you just now said is an echo from the 1980s when we were being told that we would have maybe 3 days working and the rest of the time would be in leisure time.
I mean, I worked back in, I think it was the 90s, I worked for a chap as a freelance. I looked after his technology. He went, I think it was Harvard he went to. I might be wrong, but one of the two big universities in America. And back in the 60s, there were reports being drawn up about how the effects of automation is going to, what impact it's going to have on the general population. And, we're now only in the last 5-10 years started talking about it more. And going back.
And now it's going to be a bigger threat than it was before because of the way that so many jobs are going to be lost.
And on top of that, going back to freedoms and privacy, we've got something called the Internet of Things that's coming along, and the ability for...
But will that actually work? Will the Internet of Things actually work? Because, I mean, my experience of technology is it constantly keeps breaking down. So we seem to be putting our trust in technology for automation, such as what's expected with cars. And yet technology breaks down. So you can see cars crashing because you've not got a person actually in charge of the vehicle.
I mean, you've seen the news about Google, the automated vehicles, but in reality, there's been a few accidents that's made international news coverage. But in reality, I mean, they've got so many safety mechanisms built in that they're probably more safer than a normal car driven by a person. The concerns I have is that eventually every single device that you think of will have an IP address, that unique address that enables you to connect to the internet, and all devices will be able to communicate to computer systems all around the world. I mean, your life will no longer be totally secure. I mean, do you really need a kettle that has connectivity to the internet? I'm not sure, but I mean, a fridge that talks to your supermarket, replenishing the food when it runs out. That's if we've got food in the supermarkets anyway. But you see where I'm going.
Yeah, because what do humans get to do then if everything's being taken over?
There will be some jobs still left, but I think it'll be more a case of leisure and all that sort of stuff.
If people don't have the finances to pay for that leisure, how can they have
This
a
is
leisure
where,
time?
we start to see things like universal income and citizens' income talked about, where a fundamental change in how the tax system and benefit systems work. You're basically looking at everyone getting a basic allowance from the state, and then you make it up from whatever work you're doing, which will then get taxed.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. It's a case of it. Yeah, it's okay having this new form of funding for citizens, but how's it funded? Where is the tax revenue coming from? I mean, do we tax the robots? It's what some suggestions being put forward to, or do corporates pay a higher tax, which then pay, but in order for the consumer to be able to buy their goods? It's kind of catch-22, really, isn't it?
But if you start taxing robots, then you have to start to give them rights, which becomes like human rights, and you start to have all those kind of problems as well.
Well, I think somebody's already thinking about that, giving robot rights already. So you're probably too late on that one.
So, Michael, normally at this point in the conversation, I ask people if there's anything they'd like to say they didn't get a chance to say about their particular activity. Is there anything you'd like to say at this point to conclude our conversation?
I think the time for apathy, the time for being disengaged from the political system needs to be a thing of the past. People need to become motivated. People also need to actually question what they're hearing, both from the media, from social media, and from the politicians themselves. They need to engage in debate. They need to engage in questioning what's going on. Look at different forms of sources of information and analyze, well, what am I hearing? Is it being said? Is the same thing being said by different sources of information? And if you disagree with what somebody's saying, it's gone off. Question them on social media. Write to your MPs. Get engaged with the process. Don't give up in the system. Engage in it.
Okay. One of the things that I was going to say, and hopefully we managed to record the last section. Okay. One of the things I was going to say was, you were talking about the fact that people need to be motivated to become active and to actually get involved. And I know there are quite a few people that are.
Yeah.
But those people seem to get slated and hammered so much that they actually get to the point where they give up because they are being hammered. And do you feel that basically the general population has been made docile not to interact, not to activate themselves, because basically they've been programmed that way through the media?
Partly, and partly because they don't have time to engage. They don't have time to think because of everyday living and the job workload and everything else. So it's a combination.
But could that be part of the programming? If you're so overloaded, if you're being forced to work in such a high pressure, supposedly efficient method, could that be that's what's kind of driving us to not having to be motivated, because we're so exhausted by the stresses and the pace of life that we're not able to think straight anymore. And we've been suffering from that, having this conversation.
Modern life is not easy, and it's only going to get worse. But we've got what we've got. We just need to make things better for ourselves, and the only way we can do that is engaging in this in the process.
Michael, thank you very much, because that's a really good place to end our conversation. So I look forward to talking to you again in the not too distant future. So this is Michael Kingsnorth, the political activist, my brother, living in London. Thank you for your time this week.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have more on the way, so please subscribe to this channel and check out the link below if you'd consider becoming a patron to help us keep making more content. Thanks for watching.